Good Palm Sunday morning to you. The children led us well into this time of worship, and I'm grateful to them and for them. You know, in the process of Palm Sunday in the scriptures about Jesus entering, and the people cry, "Hosanna, blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord," they're doing something extremely ancient. They're taking a part of what was known as an Old Testament enthronement psalm. So I want to preach this morning from one of those Old Testament enthronement psalms. We're going to be in Psalm 21. Matter of fact, the whole time that we're together, this morning, tonight, tomorrow night, the next night, and Wednesday morning, in those 5 times together, we're going to be in the Psalms, because I believe the Psalms are the ancient expressions of the human heart in the direction of God about all kinds of things. So this week as we're together, we're going to talk about anger. We're going to talk about when God is absent, when enemies are after us. We're going to talk about what we do with our sin. We'll talk about all kinds of things that rise out of the human heart to God. But this morning, we are in the oldest psalm of all of the Psalms, the 150 that we have in our scriptures. And it's an interesting psalm because it used to not be a psalm about God. It was actually a psalm of Baal, the god of the Canaanites. And Baal was kind of the gross national product god. He was the god of that made the rain fall on the crops and made the crops grow, so the people were wealthy. He's the one who opened the wombs of the mothers of the family, and they were able to produce children who could go out and work the fields so that the family had plenty of hands in the laboring. Baal was the god that just made you prosperous and protected you, and you appeased this god, and you placated this god. You brought this god the kind of offerings, and if you did it right, then Baal would, kind of like a vending machine, put the right thing in, you'll get out what you want. Baal was that kind of god. So along come the Israelites into the Canaanite world, and they hear this song about Baal. And what they did is they took their eraser and they just erased the name of Baal, and they inserted the name of Yahweh, the Lord, the covenant-making God of Israel. And they put God's name in this particular psalm. So it's interesting for us to come to this oldest of the psalms this morning as a way of thinking about Palm Sunday and what was happening as Jesus came into the city. Now, let me set the stage for us in this psalm, because we're not even in it until the very last verse. The truth is, we're spectators on this psalm. And what this psalm is, it is a convention. Just imagine a big convention, kind of like the gathering of the Church of the Nazarene and General Assembly in Indianapolis, where delegates from all over the world are elected, and they all show up, and they vote on who their leaders would be. Or kind of like you, the church, who gathers from all places around here, and you come in the door, and you're going to elect today who your leaders might be. This is the kind of psalm this is, except this is a convention of the gods. All of the angelic beings and the beings of power and the floating powers of the world, all the tribal gods that are out there, all of the gods of weather and nature. It's a collection, an assembly of the gods. And so they all come together, and the business before them is they have to elect the God who is God above all gods, the Lord who is Lord above all lords. So the convener of this particular assembly calls the assembly to order. And the call to order is right here in Psalm 29. It's the first 2 verses. And the convener of the assembly of all the gods declares the assembly open with these words: "Ascribe to the Lord." Yahweh is the name that's here. It used to say Baal, but now it says Yahweh. "Ascribe to the Lord, O heavenly beings. Ascribe to the Lord glory and strength. Ascribe to the Lord the glory of His name, and worship the Lord in holy splendor." This is the call. A speech is being made that they would elect the God of the Jews, Yahweh, as the God above all gods. And they're told, ascribe to this God glory. Now, it's one of my favorite Old Testament words. The Hebrew for glory is kabod. And the word sort of means how it sounds, kabod. The word means heavy, weighty, substantial. It used to be the kind of word that applied to the largest person in the room. the heaviest person in the room. Because that person, you can't miss them. I mean, they're there. They're huge, they're large, they're unmissable, unmistakable, that their presence is there. And that's what this word glory means. It means that about a God that makes this God more substantial, heavier, weightier than anything else that is around. And the convener of all the gods is saying, ascribe to the God of Israel glory. Stand in awe of him. Recognize his power and his presence, and that he is this God that is above all the other kind of gods. This is a powerful thing. And then the campaign speech happens right after that. Why? All the other gods of the tribe say, hey, we're pretty tough stuff too. I mean, we do stuff. Why is it that this God is the God above all the other gods? And so the campaign speech is now given in verse 3 through 9. Because the voice of Yahweh is over the waters. The God of glory thunders. The Lord over mighty waters. The voice of the Lord is powerful. The voice of the Lord full of majesty. The voice of the Lord breaks the cedars. The Lord breaks the cedars of Lebanon. He makes Lebanon skip like a calf and Syrian like a young wild ox. The voice of the Lord flashes forth flames of fire. The voice of the Lord shakes the wilderness. The Lord shakes the wilderness of Kadesh. The voice of the Lord causes the oaks to whirl and strips the forest bare until all in his temple say, glory. Now, one of the reasons we know that this used to be a psalm of Baal is that this is a description of a storm in Canaan. I mean, this is really like a nor'easterner. You guys need no introduction to what storms are and what storms can do when they come ashore. But if you read this, there's a geographical footprint for this particular text. This is the description of a storm that brews out over the Mediterranean Sea, comes to land across Lebanon, and then makes its way through the southern desert. And as this storm blows across, it makes noise, it dumps rain, it breaks trees, it bends crops, it blows things around, it rumbles the ground, it flashes the sky, it strips the leaves from the trees, and it sends people running for safety. And this is how Baal said, I'm big, I'm tough, don't mess with me. I can do things to you. You better appease me. You better bring me the offerings that I demand of you. And if you do, I may give you what you want. So the Israelites come along and they see this psalm that's attributing all of this stormy power to Baal. And they're going, our God can do that. Our God can deal with this kind of thing. And the truth is, the characterization of our God from Genesis to Revelation actually flows into this particular understanding of God that is here in this psalm. In Genesis 1, the earth was formless and void, and darkness hovered over the deep. I mean, that's what was there. This picture of chaos and structurelessness and deep sea and chaotic void, and nothing is there. There is no life anywhere. And then our God begins to speak, and all of a sudden the sea is pushed back and there is the dry ground. And there is the separation of these dark clouds and the earth below. And then there is the sun and the moon, and there is the ordering into time such that there is day and night. And then there begins to be living creatures, and the earth begins to thrive, and there's life everywhere. This is the picture of our God that comes. So, the Israelites are looking at this psalm that ascribes to Baal the ability to control chaotic, dark waters and to dump buckets of rain and to flash thunder and terrify people. And they look at that and they say, our God has control over all of this. This is also reflected in the story of Noah. Noah is such a fascinating story. We're 6 chapters into the story of creation and humanity. And God up and says, I regret that I've made humans on the earth. I think I'm going to wash them all away with a flood and just start all over again. And you're going, whoa, what? I mean, in 6 chapters, we have so filled the earth with violence. The word is Hamas there, a very appropriate word. We have filled the earth with Hamas. We have so violated this God who drove chaos back and gave us a planet in which to live. We so violated this God that this God says, I regret I even made them. That word regret is a word about pain, and it's the same word that's used for the pain with which the woman, Eve, gave childbirth. There's a pain in the gut of God about what His creatures have done in this world, and God's decision is, I'm going to wash them all away with a flood. And so it starts raining. And you got Noah and his crew, and they're the only thing that's left, and it rains the 40 days a night, and then everything is extinguished. The breath of everything goes away, and then they wait another 150 days. Everything is surely good and dead now. The story of Noah is the story of creation in reverse. It's the God who lets the world return to a chaotic void where there is no breath and the darkness hovers over the deep and everything is, all life is swallowed and extinguished by these dark, chaotic powers. I know parents who have decorated their little baby infants' rooms with rainbows and animal pairs and an ark. And I'm going, what are you thinking? This is a terrifying story. You know, you're going to paint the walls of your child with this reminder of the moment when God said, I'm sorry I even made humankind, and I'm going to wipe it all away. I mean, the flood is God's delete button. It's His eraser. And He's down to one floating zoo to being done with the whole thing. And then the story says, but God remembered Noah. And from that moment on in the story, the waters began to recede, the dry land begins to show up again, and before you know it, the ark is on dry ground. The animals are coming off the ark, and the very first thing they do is to offer sacrifice to God. Offering sacrifice to God. This something profound is being said to us here about the character of this God who's been voted on in Psalm 29. What's being told to us in the Noah story is this. This God is not like the other gods. The other gods, you sin, you die. You better appease me. I might give you what you want. These are gods who deal with our evil by swift and immediate retribution. You do this, you get this. This is a God who enters into creation as a God of suffering love. And rather than immediate angry retribution, this is a God who places forth a sacrifice on our behalf. And He participates with us in a covenant where He offers life, His own life. The sacrifice that's offered right off the ark in the Noah story is the beginning of what we eventually see come to fruition in the Christ who marches into the city to the tune of, blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord, and by the end of the week is the sacrifice of God hanging on a cross. A God who says, never again will I destroy the earth with flood. I am not a God of immediate and exact retribution, but rather than taking you out with my chaotic, dark power, I will redeem you with suffering love. This is a God who comes in this way. And in the story of the day that Jesus dies on the cross, you remember what happens in the middle of the day? The clouds come over until it is dark at noonday. These clouds with bucketfuls of rain. Here comes the days of Noah. Here comes the flood all over again. Hovering right above the cross is a torrential flood, powerful enough, and all God has to do is just step back for a moment and let it go. And all of a sudden, this creation that violates His Son in this way will be washed away and done with. And not a drop of rain falls. The rainbow in the Noah story, it's not there for us. God put a rainbow in the sky to remind Himself that never again will I destroy the earth with a flood. I think on the day that we crucified his son, he might have come close when the clouds gathered and the potential was there to let us see what we had done. And yet not a drop of rain fell. This God that's being voted on here in Psalm 29 is a God of powerful, suffering love. And he bears his power in this way, rather than like Baal and all the other gods who are there. I marvel at this God. It's a profound understanding of this God. So Psalm 29, the speech that's made there in verses 3 through 9, it's the voice of the Lord does this, and the voice of the Lord does this. God creates by the power of his voice. He speaks things into existence. God says, and it is done. The voice of the Lord 7 times is mentioned there. This is the God of creation in every way. And at the end of verse 9, after the speech about this storm and this God of this storm is made, the one who is convening the assembly of the gods concludes his speech with, and in his temple all say, glory, wow, kabod. This is a serious God. We have no categories for this God. I remember when Anna Ryan was 3 years old, my granddaughter, and I wanted to take her somewhere, so I took her to Chuck E. Cheese. It was her first time to Chuck E. Cheese. You guys do Chuck E. Cheese up north? Yeah, you got Chuck E.? I mean, it's nirvana for little kids. Just every bell and whistle and light going on and off, and you get tickets from the games and collect them, and you get goodies with them, and every kind of, game you can play, a ball you can throw, a button you can push, something you can ride. It's all there, and then these mechanical characters the curtains are open and they're singing everywhere, and you got all this stuff going on and a lot of bad pizza, and you're just there in the middle of this. And I mean, she's in there, she's just taking it in. I mean, she's drinking the whole thing in and amazed by everything she's seeing. And then Chuck E. Cheese comes out. A guy dressed in a 7-foot rat costume. And he starts walking among the kids. And I remember the moment. She grabbed my leg with a death grip. And her eyes were filled with terror. And she would not let go. I mean, I'm there going, honey, it's a man in a suit. He won't hurt you. I promise he won't hurt you. Look, the other kids are playing with him. It's sort of make-believe. She never let go the whole time. And it hit me that 3-year-old had no category for a 7-foot rat who walked among mere children. And when it really dawns on us who this God is that we gather to worship, we have no categories for him. Like we sang a few minutes ago, he has no rival. He has no equal. There is nothing else that acquaints us with what this God is like. And in the presence of this God, I mean, terror, glory, whoa, kabod, heavy, substantial. It's a proper response from us in this moment. That we would do this. Which explains to me why the world in which we live in would really rather have Baal. They really would. Our world would prefer a God that can kind of be controlled. Our world would prefer gods that can be placated. Our world prefers vending machine gods. You go and put the right thing in, and he'll give you what you want. We have tried so many times to turn the God of Israel, Yahweh, into that God, and he cannot be turned into that God. He is beyond our categories, beyond our manipulation. He is a God who stands alone as God, the God of gods, the King of kings, the Lord of lords. He is this God that we cannot manipulate in any way, which makes us, when we finally realize that, even stand back further and say, glory, whoa, kabod, what kind of God is this that does this kind of thing and that responds in this way to his people? Now, some of you are way ahead of me. Some of you are already thinking, I know where this is going. I know exactly where it's going. He's going over to Mark 4, and I am. He's going over to Mark 4, that story Verse 35 of Mark 4. On that day, when evening had come, Jesus said to his disciples, let's go across the lake to the other side. And after leaving the crowds behind, they took Jesus with them in the boat just as he was. Other boats were with them, and a great windstorm arose. And the waves beat into the boat so that the boat was already being swamped. And Jesus was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him up and said to him, Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? And Jesus woke up and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, Peace, be still. I just see Jesus standing on the stern of the boat, looking into the storm, going, Shh, you down. Hush. And the wind ceased. And there was a dead calm. And he said to them, Why were you afraid? Have you still no faith? It's his way of saying, Do you not know who I am? And listen to the response. And they were filled with great awe and said to one another, Who is this, that even the wind and the waves obey him? Here is the God of ultimate power over the chaotic waters and the chaotic wind and the chaotic waves, the God who stands in the face of that and says, enough of you, down. And it is a dead calm. And their response is the same response we saw in the temple between all the gods there. After the Lord is explained and described as a storm coming abroad, and the whole temple said, Glory, glory. Now, I don't think this story ends here. I actually think it goes right on into chapter 5, because they get to the shore where they're going, and what do they encounter? They encounter this wild dude. I mean, he's really wild. He won't wear clothes. He's been chained up, and he breaks the chains. He screams and he yells, and he lives among the tombs. They won't let him in town. His family won't come close to him. He is dangerous, and they just try to keep him out there where all the dead people are and all the unclean bodies are. Just leave that man out there, because this man is filled with chaotic storm. This man, there's a storm brewing in him, and it is destructive anyway. He lived among the tombs, it says, and no one could restrain him, even with chains. He had often been restrained with shackles and chains, but the chains were wrenched apart. He broke the shackles in pieces, and no one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always howling and bruising himself with stones. And when he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and bowed down before Jesus and shouted at the top of his voice, What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God, Son of the one who was voted in Psalm 29, top of the heap of the gods? What have you to do with me? I adjure you by God, do not torment me. For Jesus had said to the man, Come out of the man, you unclean spirit. Then Jesus asked the man, What is your name? And the man replied, My name is Legion, for we are many. What is the man saying? The dark powers of chaos, the storms that Baal can brew, the deep, the darkness that hovers over the deep, all of that has come to live in me. And it dwells in me in all of its strength and power and force. And my life is nothing but pure chaos. And then Jesus had said, Come out of the man. And so the demons that were in the man, the legion of demons, begged him earnestly not to send them out of the country. I like this. Here are the chaos demons saying to Jesus, We'd really like to stay local if that would be okay with you. Don't send us to another land. We're sort of familiar with the territory around here. Now there on the hillside, a great herd of swine was feeding, and the unclean spirits begged him, Send us into the pigs. Let us enter them. So Jesus gave them permission. I love this. The unclean animals, and here are the unclean demons of chaos in this man, and they know they're about to be evicted. Could we go over here and live in the pigs? And so Jesus says, Sure, go live in the pigs. So they go live in the pigs. And what do the pigs do? They make a beeline to the sea. The dark sea. They're going home to Papa. They're going home to the deep, dark sea of chaos. And they plunge there into the sea. I love it. The swineherds ran off and told in the city and the country what had happened. And the people came out to see what it was that happened. They came to Jesus and saw the demoniac sitting there, clothed and in his right mind. It's how I've always wanted college students to be found, clothed and in their right mind. The very man who had the legion was sitting there, and they were terrified. They had no category for a God who could do this. They had never seen any power that could tame this kind of chaos. And those who had seen what had happened to the demoniac and to the swine reported it, and they began to beg Jesus to leave their neighborhood. As he was getting into the boat, the man who had been possessed by demons begged him to go with him, and Jesus refused and said, "No, go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and what mercy he has shown on you." And then Jesus left. Here is Jesus. Not only does he get in a boat and sail into a storm and say, "Shh, enough, down," and leave a chaotic storm, a dead calm sea, but he comes face to face with a person whose life is tormented by evil, who has been so wrecked and ruined in every way by the dark chaos that hovers within his own soul. And Jesus comes face to face with him and says to the powers that control this man, "Enough, out." And here is the man, clothed and in his right mind, going home to his family and friends that he might tell them everything that God has done for them. This is the kind of God that's being voted on here. Now, back to Psalm 29, because the election is being held. Votes are being counted while I've been telling this story of Mark chapter 4 and 5. And while the votes are counted, finally the votes come in, and the votes are announced in verse 10. The Lord sits enthroned over the flood. The Lord sits enthroned as king forever. Yahweh wins the vote. The gods themselves agree that he is the King of kings and Lord of lords. And then I love verse 10 because this is the first time that we show up. What does this God do with this kind of power? We know what Baal does with this kind of power. We know what dark chaos does with this kind of power. It ruins human lives. We know what the evil one does with this kind of power. It brings people to the brink of harming themselves and harming others and yelling and howling, all kinds of things that make no sense. It brings people to utter chaos. But what does our God do with this kind of power? Verse 11, the Lord gives strength to his people. The Lord blesses his people with peace. Ours is a God who uses this awesome, nothing like it power to make his weak creatures strong and to bless us with peace at the core of our being, rather than leaving us to the wiles of the chaos that will destroy our lives. What a God. There is no other God like this. And we gather every Sunday in this place to vote for this God. That's what our worship does. Our worship is a vote. It is our way of saying, in the middle of all the other gods that are out there, I mean the gods of technology and the gods of prosperity and the gods of political correctness and the gods of politics and the gods of wealth and the gods of using other people and the gods of sexuality and the gods of pleasure and the gods of put yourself first and the gods of, crawl to the top of the heap. All of these other gods that are screaming for our vote all week long, saying, vote for me, I'll placate you, I'll give you what you want. We're vending machine gods. Put the right thing into us and you'll get the right thing out, just what you want. And ours is a God that we gather here on Sunday, who isn't here to make deals with us, but who simply says, in suffering love, I will come to you in your brokenness, and I will lay down my life to demonstrate to you that I love you. And when you surrender your life to me, I will lift you up and make you strong. And I will bless you with peace at the very core of your being. I have to make one more stop before we pull into the station here. The book of Revelation is this story too. Remember in chapter 4, there's the throne of God, and God sits on the throne, and there are the 24 elders around the throne who are singing worship and praise to God, and the 4 living creatures representing everything that breathes. They're all praising God. It's this great enthronement of God, and there's praise and worship going to this God that's there. And there's this one little sentence, and it says, before the throne, the sea was as glass. Do you know what that means? Do you get what that means in the middle of this? The chaotic sea before the throne of this praised and worshiped God, it's like glass. It's as smooth as glass. Evil cannot even whip up a ripple in front of the throne of God. The sea is tamed before the throne of this God. It cannot manifest itself to do harm to the creatures of God before this throne. As Revelation goes on through, over in chapters 13 and 14, if you remember, the beast comes out of the sea. The big bad beast, out of the sea of chaos, and he goes around and he marks people with 666. He goes around, this chaos beast out of the dark sea. He goes around saying, "You're mine, you're mine, you're mine, you're mine." He marks them 666 on the forehead. He's laying claim to humans as his own possession. I control them, I own them, I make them do what I want them to do. But that beast comes face to face over in chapter 20 with the slaughtered lamb, the sacrifice of God. That we saw all the way back in Noah. The sacrifice of God, the one who died on the cross, the slaughtered lamb, face to face with that chaos beast, defeats the beast. And then Revelation ends there in chapter 21, where the New Jerusalem comes down, and God announces that my dwelling is with my people. And remember the little phrase right there in Revelation 21? It says, "And the New Jerusalem came down, and the sea was no more." Chaos was done with. It was over. God had won the battle ultimately and infinitely. And this God had brought evil under his power and had given to his people his presence, his blessing, and his strength, and his peace in every way. Anna Ryan was in the back seat. She was strapped in tight. The car seat that she had would have withstood a NASA crash, I'm sure. She was all strapped in really tight. We were just driving along one day, and she just kind of started singing, "How great is our God. Sing with me, how great is our God." And she get just louder and louder and louder. Just, "How great is our God. How great is our God." And finally she said to me, "Papa, roll the window down." And I said, "Anna, why do you need me to roll the window down?" She said, "All those people out there don't know how great our God is. And I need to tell them that." And she just cranked it up and sang it. You know what blows me away? The same child at the same age, scared to death of a terrifying 7-foot rat in a costume, was not afraid of this God. Because this God to her was the salvation of all the earth and all the people of the earth. Roll the window down, Papa. We need to tell people about this God, because what he can do is awesome. Glory, kabod. Let's stand and sing about this God together.
a world that would love to tell us that there's a lot of darkness, we serve a God that is so great, and we are so thankful for that. Would you pray with me this morning? Father, you are awesome. We could stand here and we could sing your praises all day long because you have won it. You've done it. You're doing it. You're teaching us. You're showing us. You love us. And you're bringing order to what may seem chaotic at times. God, we thank you for who you are. We thank you for what we celebrate this morning. You are an awesome and a faithful God. We pray that we would go out of here as people who know what kind of God you are, that we would live with the power that you've placed inside of us, that we would tell this world as we head into the Holy Week about your love, that we would invite our neighbors, that we would share the passions that you've placed in our heart, that you've put in there for us to share. God, would we not be silent this week, but would you teach us, would you show us, would you grow us? We love you so much, and we are so grateful for just how big of a God you are. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. We want to just remind you this morning as you go out that we have small groups available. We would love for you to plug into those as you head out. Also, we would love for you to come back tonight at 7 p.m. to hear Dr. Boone again. Come out and be a part of this awesome revival week. We're so glad you're here this morning. You're dismissed.